Hey guys, I'm Shitaranki from CodeYourPassion, and in this tutorial, we're going to be looking at how we can actually break up our project into smaller parts so that we can actually start to understand the concepts that lay behind it. Let's jump right into it. Okay, so right here, I have my program open, and as you can see, the curve is actually showing the graph of x squared plus x minus 5. So what exactly does this mean? Well, what actually happens is that the function is nothing but what takes an input and it gives us an output. So in this case, the input could be x equals 0. Then the output would be the y value at that position where we actually plug in 0 for all the x's. So in that case, we get negative 5. Then, when it's x equals 2, we get 1. And x equals 3, we get 7. And so forth. So what I want to do in this video is to just cover how we can actually get an input and take an and actually get an output from our program, which just gives us the value of y. Let's see how that works. Okay, so this is where we started off in the previous video. So what I want to do is I want to just go ahead and delete all of what we learned there, and let's start from scratch. So let's just say that we get an x, and I'm just going to hard code it in as 0. So now what we want to do is we want to get a y value as the result. And I'm putting double for y because we don't want to limit the y value without giving it a decimal place. So this will actually be x squared plus x minus 5. So to do that, we can do a bunch of operations, additions and squares, where we do this. So now this is actually giving us the result of x squared plus x minus 5. And so now printing out this y value that we get, we can see that it is indeed as we expected. So we get negative 5.0. Okay. So now I have a question to you guys. I want to use this y value that we calculated right here to actually come up with what the y value at 2, x equals 2 is. So let's say that I have int x2 equals 2. What is that y2 equal to? And I want to use y for this. Is it possible? Well, I hope you guys figured it out that it isn't actually possible. Why? Because all y is a variable, and a variable just stores one value. It does not store the sequence of operations that were taken to actually get to that value. Now the question is, how can we actually store the sequence of operations? Instead of just having to rewrite this sequence of operations every single time. So in this case, we would have to rewrite math.pow x squared and so on just to get the value of y at x2. So to solve this, what we can do is we can actually understand this one concept called functions. So let's create one function right now. Static void execute expression. So the main thing that differentiates a function from anything else is that it has these two parentheses at the end, and then it has curly braces. Then I can go ahead and call this function by just writing execute expression, and I also have those two parentheses and the semicolon. So now let's do something in this function. So right now, I'm just going to print out hello world. So now what happens is that whenever I call this function, it runs what's inside it. So it's going to run hello world, and then it sees, oh, I'm at the end of the function, so it just gets out of the function. So let's run it and see what happens. So now we see that we get hello world. Now I can run this same call multiple different times to see that we're actually just going to run this line 3 times. Okay, so now we've actually simplified this one line to just this name, execute expressions. So now we can even have multiple different system.out.print lines in this one function and have multiple commands execute. Now we see that this is exactly what we wanted to do. Let's just now try to actually implement it for our use case. So what we want to do is we want to actually calculate math.pow x squared plus x minus 5 in this one function. We want to get that result. So let's just go ahead and print it out, because right now we're getting an error that we can't just write it like that. We have to actually do something with it. So yeah, let's print it out. But now we're getting an error. X cannot be resolved to a variable. So why are we getting this error? Well, here the error is that the way functions work is that they cannot read the variables that are in other functions. So in this case, we're using x, and we expect to use this x from this function. So how can we actually solve this? Well, we actually have to pass in this x as a parameter to this function. So how can we do that? Well, to create a parameter, we actually have to just write this. So this is saying that the name of the parameter is an x, and the type of this parameter is an int. So now I can pass in x. And so what will happen is that it'll look at the value of x. So in this case, the value of x is 0. And then it'll say x equals 0. So this means that I don't only have to pass in a variable. I can even just pass in a random value as 30. And we can find out what this execute expression is. And so I can actually just print this out. And what I get is 925. That's when x equals 30. What about when x equals 0? Well, we can see that we have -5. Now I can also run this as many times as possible without having to write math.pow each and every time. So let's go ahead and run it with 9. So I get -5 and 85. So as you can see, this is actually making it a whole lot simpler for us. But now what I actually want to do is, let's say what I want to do is add 5 to the value of that and print it out. So we actually get an error here. The operator plus is undefined for the argument type void. So how can we fix this error? Well, what this means is that the error is nothing but the fact that we're not getting anything back from this equation, from this function. So we're taking an input, but now we expect an output. But how can we actually give an output? Well, we have to add a return statement here. So let's go ahead and replace this with return. And there's an extra parenthesis at the end, so let's remove that. And now we get void methods cannot return a value. Well, so now once again we see that the term is void. And so now the error is that, well, each function actually has a type of its own. And the type is what it returns. And for a void method, where we see that this main method is also a void method, it does not return anything. So we do not have to have anything here. So let's change this to maybe just a double. So we want to return a double. And so now this is of type double, so it works out. But what would happen if we did not return anything at all? Well, we get an error. This method must return a type of double. So when we give a return type other than void, we get an error. So that's why we use void in the main method, because we don't expect to return anything. Okay, so now that we do that, we can now go ahead and actually see that we can place this as the argument to or y. And we can see that we get or y printed out as -5. Well, that's about it for this video. We learned about how functions work, how we can pass in arguments to functions, and how we can actually get an output. Really hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please leave a like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. In the next video, we'll be understanding how we can make our function continuous, as we see in our actual implementation. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.